Amen. Thank you, Brother Sheldon. Fine job. Take your Bibles, turn to the book of Nehemiah, chapter 4. Book of Nehemiah, chapter 4. We're going to begin our reading in verse 1. But it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall, he was wroth, and took great indignation, and mocked the Jews. And he spake before his brethren in the army of Samaria, and said, What do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was by him, and he said, Even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall break down their stone wall. Hear, O God, for we are despised. And turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them up for a prey in the land of captivity. And cover not their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out from before thee. For they have provoked thee to anger before the builders. So built we the wall, and all the wall was joined together, and the half thereof, for the people had a mind to work. But it came to pass that when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabians, and the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the wall of Jerusalem were made up, and that the breaches began to be stopped, then they were very wroth, and conspired all of them together to come out and to fight against Jerusalem, and to hinder it. Nevertheless, we made our prayer unto our God, and set a watch against them day and night because of them. And Judah said, The strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall. And our adversary said, They shall not know, neither see, till we come into the midst among them, and slay them, and cause the work to cease. And it came to pass that when the Jews which dwelt by them came, they said unto us 10 times, From all places whence ye shall return unto us, they will be upon you. Therefore set I in the lower places behind the wall, and on the higher places I even set the people after their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. I looked and rose up and said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, Be not ye afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses. And it came to pass when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, every one to his work. And it came to pass from that time forth that half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held both the spears, the shields, the bows, and I tried to say that word 1,000 times. I could not get it, but somebody Google it, okay? And the rulers were behind all the house of Judah. They which builded on the wall, and they that bare burdens, which those that laded, every one with one his hands wrought in the work, and with the other kind held a weapon. For the builders, every one had his sword girded by his side, and so builded. And he that sounded the trumpet was by me. And I said unto the nobles, and to the rulers, and to the rest of the people, The work is great and large, and we are separated upon the wall, one far from the other. In what places, therefore, ye hear the sound of a trumpet, resort ye thither unto us, our God shall fight for us. So we labored in the work, and half of them held the spears from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. Likewise at the same time said I unto the people, Let every one with his servant lodge within Jerusalem, that in the night they may be a guard to us, and labor on the day. So neither I, nor my brethren, nor my servants, nor the men of the guard which follow me, none of us put off our clothes, saving that every one of them put off for washing. Let's go to God in prayer, and let's ask for his many blessings over our services this evening. Dear God, I just come before you today. I'm so thankful for your love and for your grace and for your mercy. And God, I just ask that our time spent together this evening would not be for naught, but it would be, Lord, that you would bless and be amongst us as we preach and as we listen to your word. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Just to give some background as to where we were last time. Last time I preached was about 3 months ago. Does anybody here remember what we talked about 3 months ago? No? Okay. I appreciate whoever was honest back there. But Nehemiah, just for some clarity, he was initially a man burdened by God's calling. It was nothing more than a calling in his life, just an idea in his mind at one time, which eventually developed into reality. And he eventually would return to Jerusalem through a set of circumstances to rebuild the city of his fathers that was once thriving and was now burnt to the ground. So he begins to rebuild the city. Now, in Nehemiah 4, we enter a story of God's people facing a difficult task of rebuilding Jerusalem's broken walls. Their determination is met with strong opposition, but through challenges, we can witness the resolve of Nehemiah and the people to remain steadfast in their faith. So, just right off the bat, chapter 3, for those who don't remember last time, we ended on this passage where it just had, and this person rebuilt this, and this person rebuilt this, and this person rebuilt this, and you're like, I don't know what half of this stuff means. But you know what we do know? They rebuilt a lot of things. The city was getting moving. Things were getting rebuilt. Jerusalem was becoming Jerusalem again. And then right off the bat enters the villains of our story, Sanballat and Tobiah, who become the adversaries right off the bat by mocking and ridiculing the Jewish people's effort to rebuild the wall. They insult the work, calling it feeble and doubting its strength. They even say things like this: "What do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall." Now, for those of you who don't know, I am a huge fan of boxing. Love boxing. Love it. I only talked about it like my first 3 months here until everybody was like, "Dude, stop." And then I went to Bigfoot, and now you guys are like, "Please go back to boxing." But one of my least favorite boxers in the world is a young man. His name is Jake Paul. And Jake Paul, somehow, some way, has gotten to fight a lot of really high-ranking emphasis on retired people. And Jake Paul beats up everybody he fights because everybody he fights is like 50 pounds smaller than him. But Jake Paul's true weapon is not his fighting ability, which is good, I will give him that. It's his trash talk. Trash talk is a simple method of getting into somebody's head before the real fight begins. And I know that because I've seen some of you guys do it during the Cornhole League. I borderline won't even play with some of you guys. I'm standing across and I'm like, this man represents peace and love and long-suffering until it's cornhole time. And I'm like, y'all are too much. So you want to know pure flesh, men's cornhole league. Show up. Show up. And yeah, it's great. So basically what's happening is God's enemies right off the bat are just talking smack. They're right off the bat. They once had this city burned into the rubble. The stones themselves were burnt. The gate was broken down. And Tobiah is looking at the Jews rebuilding Jerusalem. And right off the bat, his first objective is to take away their spirit and be dismissive of what God's trying to do there. So they're seeing the building, but the building's not compelling him enough right off the bat. So Sanballat and Tobiah are looking at it and they're like, okay, well, if a fox went up the wall, they would break it down. And understanding that the belief from most scholars is that Tobiah is the reason and Sanballat are the reason that if the Jews wanted to rebuild, they couldn't have rebuilt before without Nehemiah being there. Because imagine Nehemiah shows up, he has this Persian guard with him, he has all this lumber, all these tools, all these resources. So this guy shows up who's represented by Persia, and they're thinking to themselves, maybe going in there and killing this guy is probably not a great idea, because that was some pretty nifty technology they had there to rebuild this place. So they're not just attacking them right away, but they're like, you know what, guys, what they're doing, they're not doing anything that's worth getting into a big deal about. A fox could run up the wall and destroy it. But Nehemiah's response is he immediately prays. He doesn't lash out in anger or internalize their doubts. Instead, he turns to God in praying, "Hear our God, for we are despised." When faced with criticism or doubt, we too must turn to God in prayer, trusting that he will strengthen us for the task that he has set before us. Then the people came with a mind to build. Brother Gus, isn't that the same point you made last time? Yes, it is. Because every time something comes up, Nehemiah leads the people and establishes within them a mind to build. And despite the taunts of their enemies, Nehemiah and the people built the wall, and the wall was joined together unto the half thereof, for the people had a mind to work. Their determination and commitment was undeterred by negativity because they kept their focus on the task at hand. Nehemiah's organization and encouragement of the people enabled them to press on with a vision to rebuild Jerusalem. Now, this verse calls us to continue diligently in our own work. Whatever God has called you to build, whether it's a ministry, a family, a mission, whatever it can be, keep your focus on God. Where our hearts are set on the Lord, he blesses the work of our hands. Then he has to teach the people to overcome their fear through having faith. When their enemies conspired to attack them, Nehemiah encouraged the people, saying, "Be not ye afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible." He redirected their focus from the power of their enemies to the power of their God, reminding them that God is not too big to face any problem on his own. This reminder is essential for us as well. When fear threatens to take hold of us, we must remember the greatness of our God in the midst of trials. His faithfulness has seen us through trials many times before, and his power is greater than any oppressor who comes before us. I can't help but think about the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. I can't help but think about a young man named David facing Goliath, which what would be in the face of certain death. God triumphed and allowed a young man to destroy the greatest of enemies. Noah built a great ark to preserve mankind and preserve all the animals that existed in the world. He faced Earth's extinction, and Noah was the only person there, and he just trusted in God. And Nehemiah also believed very much in the importance of having a community of people around you. Nehemiah placed guards in vulnerable positions and organized the people in the groups. So while one half worked, the other half kept watch. Specifically, they shared responsibility, which provided both strength and security to the people. And this just goes to show us that it's very important that we as Christians have to have unity in the face of opposition. That God has designed us to work together, supporting and protecting one another. Having a community of believers besides us gives us the resilience to continue our work for God's glory. We are not a community because of who we have in the White House or any local government. We're a community around the God that we serve, no matter who is ruling our lands. And I just want to emphasize that, and I'm not a political guy. I frankly hate election season. I hate it. Well, Brother Gus, don't you care about our country? Yes, I do. I do, but I don't care for the rhetoric. And I'll be very upfront with you. The world has done a really great job of turning the Christian church into political activists, and then people who'll stand up and wear the MAGA hat and say, Trump! And then, but when it comes to soul winning, they're the most ashamed person in the room. Well, how is that? Because we've been redirected in our focus. The devil has used personal liberties and personal freedoms to redirect us rather than preaching the truest freedom of all, which would be Christ Jesus. The Jews worked very hard to have the resolve to finish their work. In the closing verses, Nehemiah reminds the people to remain vigilant. He sets up a rallying point, saying, "In what place, therefore, you hear the sound of a trumpet, resort ye thither unto us. Our God shall fight for us." Nehemiah and his people relied on God's protection even as they stayed watchful. This is a reminder that our battles are ultimately won by God's hand. That Nehemiah's resolve to finish the wall despite the challenge of violence calls us to persevere in our own work, trusting that God will fight for us in the end. Nehemiah 4 is a passage that speaks to anybody facing resistance right now. It teaches us to respond to opposition with prayer, to stay committed to the work God has called us to, and to remember, most importantly, his strength. We are called to work with all of our hearts, relying on faith over fear, finding strength in our community, and trusting that God will fight for us. And as Nehemiah and his people pressed on to complete the wall, they remained unwavered in their faith, knowing that the God who called us to build will see us through. May we, like Nehemiah, remain focused on the great work of God until the day we see his promise fulfilled. That means a lot of different things, and we'll begin to unpack this passage right now. That means that if you have a ministry, you need to work hard and see it through. Well, Brother Gus, that's a great question, because how do I, hold on. I never use the water, and then the one time I get parched. I'm in the middle of a sentence. Excuse me. Well, the question is, how do I work hard at ministry? Okay. What's a great example of this? Be on time. What's a great way to work at a ministry? When you're at your ministry, be involved in your ministry. What does that also mean? That means, for instance, one of your duties outside of the church is personal evangelism. That means if you share the gospel with somebody, follow up with them. That means get their contact information. That means actively pray for them. That means actively seek God's face. If you are currently being opposed, you must have faith and you must keep on. And I will be the first to say this, I have had job opportunities corrupted because I refused to compromise going to church. I have had opportunities slip through my fingers where I could have made a lot more money because I was so dedicated to church. Times will come where you are going to miss out on something in the moment because you're faithful to God. It's going to happen. I'm sure if we went around the room and asked people to raise their hands, we'd have a lot of people testifying to that very same thing. Understanding that one day God will complete his work and that he will reap his harvest. And that one day you will give an account for something, and you will have to determine, did I compromise my work or did I compromise the faith that I had for something that could have been accepted in the moment? And lastly, what could I rebuild, Brother Gus? Well, I would say rebuild your life. You can rebuild what was once lost, that was something that you once had, through God's infinite and matchless grace. You are never, ever too far from God where God can't use you anymore. God doesn't have a dirty laundry bin where you throw your holy socks or the trash can you throw the food scraps that don't work anymore. God can use anybody at any time. And put faith and trust in him that God can use you. And if you just ask, he will. Because in the face of opposition, Nehemiah led the people of God to remain focused on his calling, showing faith. Sorry, I got my notes all messed up. Okay, there we go. Showing faith, courage, and unity as they rely on God's strength to overcome their adversaries and rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. For God's church to overcome the world, we must first understand that Christ has overcome it for us first. Yet he still calls us to labor. And, excuse me. God still calls us to labor. And what does that mean? We have this struggle sometimes. We have a hard time deciphering how do we serve God fully while mutually serving at the best of our abilities. Because in the end, doesn't that mean that really I'm the one that's doing the work, not God? Well, I just want to encourage some of you guys that God's calling to labor exemplifies an outward expression of faith that God can provide and protect if we give him our best. We must understand that we are in a position of receiving blessings and having faith. And there's going to come times in some of our lives where it's going to seem like, Brother Gus, I've made a mess of my life, or just circumstances have made a mess of my life, or whatever the case may be. We have to step back and say, God, I understand that if I stay faithful to you, that you are going to finish the work in the end. One of the best examples I can think of in my personal life was when my wife and I moved here. We had a mission: no matter how hard things get, we're going to be faithful with our giving. That was the one thing. Like we are going to give to God what is due to him, no matter what. And then God blessed us by my wife getting rear-ended by somebody going 45 miles an hour. I'm going to elaborate a little bit. Some of you are like, what? My wife is at standstill traffic. I won't share all the details, but I'll share a few of them. The girl hit her going to standstill going 45. She wasn't wearing, her kid wasn't in a car seat, her 3-year-old. She had open alcohol containers in the car. She was on her phone. We could go down the list. So it was the perfect, whammo, case closed. Well, thankfully it wasn't my car that got wrecked. It was Rebecca's, so I still had my car. And they had 2 cars, so they were fine. And we thought that was it. Okay, she got wrecked. They paid for everything else. And we were really praying, God, we really need a new car right now. New for us, but we need a new car right now. And we just kept praying about it and praying about it and praying about it. And then one day, insurance calls and says, hey, we're going to give you this amount of money, and, thanks. And then please don't sue us. And then when that was over, we got some money in the mail, far beyond our expectations, and God provided our need in a way that we could not have saved up for. The money just wasn't there. It didn't make sense. But because we were faithful in such a small thing, God blessed us in a great way. And there's been so many times, so many more times I can count, where I wouldn't even give God an inch, and I was disappointed that God didn't come through for me. And that can be us sometimes, where we sit back at our life, we throw our feet up at the end of the day after church, we're watching the news, we're watching football, or whatever else. We're like, man, God hasn't blessed me. Why do I go to church? Why do I give? Why do I pray? Why do I sacrifice? Why do I do all of this as a Christian if God's not blessing me? Well, I would like to encourage you have air in your lungs. You have a home that you return to. You could walk into your fridge right now, open it up, and get your Pop-Tarts out. Do you guys put your Pop-Tarts in the refrigerator? Forget I said that. I also put my bread in the fridge too. So, and then my wife's like, why do you do this? And she moves it out. And so, okay, let's reverse that too. But the point being is that you can walk into your fridge right now and you could get food and you could eat. You have a car that works. Some of you, it's like, mine's barely working. Well, you have a car that works. You live in a place where God has infinitely blessed us compared to the rest of the world, and that's, let me be clear, it's not because of you, and that's not because of me. That's because God's just been good to put you where you are so that you can be faithful with the much that he has given to you. And sometimes we step back, we take a really nihilistic view of life, and we say, well, if God doesn't give me X, Y, Z, and I know the end result, then why should I trust him now? Because you don't even realize how much he has blessed you up until this point. Think about God's people in Jerusalem. They once sat in rubble that was once burned with fire. And then out of nowhere, they're like, who is that? And some guy rides over on his horse, and then an entourage follows him with what they need to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. God can change your life like that if you simply have faith. But the question is do you lack faith? We are so blessed beyond what we understand. If you just have a little bit of faith. Jesus in the New Testament talks about the faith of a mustard seed, something so small. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Miss Carrie have a little mustard seed jar around here? You can put like a bunch in this little old jar. Just have a little bit of faith, and God can bless you in a way you can't even imagine. I don't know what your opposition is today. Some of you might be facing persecution in the workplace because of your beliefs. Some of you might be struggling to give a little bit of effort. Some of you might be struggling to be unified in your local church. And I'd like to tell you this. Do your best to express all of those things in your local body. Because we do not know the day that God's going to be ready to bless us. But what if Lighthouse Baptist Church wasn't ready for God's blessings and it went right over our head and we didn't even know it? What if a visitor walks into our church and we don't know who he is? And, if it's one of you in this room, like, please hook us up, But what if we had like a multimillionaire walk in this room, right? Would we be friends with him because he was a multimillionaire? Or would we be friends with him because it was the right thing to do? Are we only in relationships that we have out of the benefit that it can apply to us? Or are we doing something that is right because it's the right thing to do in the first place? But if a millionaire walked in here and said, this is a good place, good people. Yeah, here, y'all want that new building? Done. Here, I'll get you another building too. And here, people are like, that's ridiculous. That kind of stuff has happened. What's a great example? Brother Tyler. Just see what happened to his building situation? Something that just didn't exist, then exists. Oh, and we're going to pay for your rent for like a year, I believe. That's God thing. That's a God thing. And some of you are sitting here right now and you're like, God cannot bless my life. By you saying that, it just exemplifies the lack of faith that you have. And I will tell you this, if I prayed as much as I complained, or if I prayed as much as I stressed, what could have God done in my life so many times over? And the more I study the scriptures and the more I listen to preaching, the more I understand the fact that I've sat back so many times and my blood pressure's risen and I'm stressing out about stuff, and I just could go back and say, Gus, just have faith. God has not abandoned you now up to this point. Why would he start it now? Why? And I love the stories of so many of you in this room who have been moved, and God has made you missionaries and brought you back. And I'm sure if you asked Brother Honey and Brother Sam about times when they were in Vietnam and they were on the field, there was like, God's provision, where's it going to come from? And then something happened, and it was like, wow. God could be preparing Lighthouse Baptist right now for a man to ride over the hill with everything that we need. God could be preparing a great thing for us right now, but we could be missing out on that opportunity if we do not simply have faith in what he is trying to do at this church. So I'll read these 3 points, then we'll close up. If you have a ministry, work hard and see it through. If you have opposition, have faith and keep on. And amongst our brothers, be unified under, most importantly, God's mission and God's plan for our lives. As we stand to our feet with heads bowed and eyes closed, I just want to pose one question to you guys. From the 3 points that we made, am I following God? Am I obeying God the way that I should be at this point in time? When it comes to work, when it comes to friendships, when it comes to just giving a little bit, am I having the faith that I need to, trusting in God's perfect will and his perfect way?